Greetings. This is David Kong, the founder and principal of DI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering individuals realize their career aspirations. We are delighted to welcome Nicolas Graff, the Associate Dean of the Jonathan M. Tisch Center for Hospitality at New York University. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
It's great to have you. I know how busy you are. Thanks for taking the time. A lot of people have probably seen you at the NYU conference, and you've been around the speaking circuit also. I think people know you, but some may not know how you ended up being where you are today and doing a great, wonderful work that you do now. And perhaps you can share your career journey, starting from when you were, I understand you were being trained as a professional chef.
Absolutely. In fact, so I was born in Switzerland, and I'm a high school dropout. You know, my parents wanted me to pursue a university. They themselves didn't go to a university, so they wanted me to be to get a college degree, but I wasn't ready for it at 16, 17. I wasn't ready for it. So I was able to do an apprenticeship, a chef apprenticeship in Switzerland, which is a well-regarded career pathway. When you think about it, Switzerland and Germany, about 70% of the people never go to college. They get a job and a career via the apprenticeship model, and Switzerland is doing just fine with that. Now, towards the end of my apprenticeship program, where you work for most of the week and then you go to school 1 or 2 days a week. Towards the end of it, the owner of the restaurant I was working at went bankrupt, and so kind of gave me a shock. And I thought, if I wanted to achieve my goal, which was my dream, to own a restaurant, I also needed to learn a little more of the management side of things. So I was luckily within the Swiss educational system, I was able to get back into higher education, and I got my bachelor degree from École Hôtelière de Lausanne, Lausanne Hotel School in Switzerland. And then I discovered new skills. I discovered that I actually liked reading books, and I was pretty good in finance. So at the end of the bachelor degree, the school was launching a new MBA program together with HEC Lausanne, and they said, do you want to do an MBA? And you can do it part time, and you be a teaching assistant part time. And I said, is that going to be free? And they said, yeah, free of charge. You're getting paid for the teaching assistant position. I said, why not? So I got my MBA, and during the MBA time, I met with a number of professors that inspired me. Still with us, Sto Shoemaker, who's the dean of UNLV, and others, and one of them, Mike Olson, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, just really inspired me. And he said, why don't you do a PhD with me? And I said, well, if it's with you, why not? What's a PhD, by the way? And so I went to Blacksburg, Virginia. And I remember we landed in Reagan Airport in DC, and we were delayed by a day due to a total blackout on the East Coast. And so I had a car rental. I took the cheapest one. But when I got to the car rental shop, they said, well, you were supposed to be here yesterday. And I said, well, sorry, we were delayed. And they said, okay, the only car left was a yellow Mustang. And so a bright yellow Mustang. And so I was upgraded, and I took that bright yellow Mustang and driving up to Blacksburg and something. So I was there at Virginia Tech, got my PhD in finance, and the rest is pretty much history. Then I taught at the University of Houston, went back in Europe at Les Roches, at Lausanne, at ESSEC Business School, and I'm now here at NYU. So that's a little bit my journey.
Well, that's been a spectacular journey, but it's interesting that you mentioned the professors that helped guide you and helped get you into the PhD program, and no doubt gave you a lot of mentoring. It really speaks to the importance of networking and finding advocates and mentors along the way. Well done.
Thank you.
Now, you are a Swiss national, but I think you just got your green card, right? So you are a U.S. immigrant as well, and you lived in different countries. Tell us, how did you try to fit in as a foreigner in many ways? How do you find the ability to adapt to different cultures and different languages and different ways of how things are done?
It's it hasn't been always easy. Number one, so you have to be um, steadfast in your journey. I think and resilient sometimes, but I think it's about curiosity. You need to be curious about others. I've always, been a people person, so I like being with people, and so you have to be open-minded, curious, of course, respectful, and the curiosity also needs to be curiosity about differences. You need to be, you need to be aware of the others, and be curious about why they may be different in the way they behave or in the way they think. And so I've made a few mistakes along the way, mistakes of not understanding some sensitivities. And I remember when I got back in the U.S. and I've been in and out of the U.S. for the past 20 years, between my study and internship in the U.S. on the West Coast, in Newport Beach. But when I came back about 5 years ago, the notion of diversity, for instance, and equity, inclusion, and all of these subjects was really growing, had grown for years, but was really kind of front and center, and which it wasn't 15 years ago when I got my PhD, right? It wasn't the same discussion. And it isn't the same discussion back in Europe. When you think about Europe, I lived in France. It's not about equity; it's about equality, which is very different. It's the French said it's liberty, equality, and what is it? Liberté, égalité, fraternité, which is another word. So that's the foundation of the French Republic. And so equality is very different from equity. Equality is everybody's equal. Equity is you treat people in an equitable way, which by the way happens to be different depending on each individual's background. And all of these very subtle differences, you have to be aware of them. You have to be aware and curious about learning about them. So that's one thing in terms of adapting to other cultures, other behaviors. And I remember I took at NYU, I took a couple of courses we have on things like microaggressions, and it stuck with me really because I took that course, and a few weeks later I met with some new students and asked one of the students, "Hey, where are you from?" And that student was Asian, was an Asian student, and he said, "I'm from Long Island," and I was, that's great, and but all of a sudden I thought, is that that could have been perceived as a kind of an aggression. You're asking me because I'm Asian, right? You're not asking me because you really want to know me. You're asking me because I'm Asian, and all of these things were things I was not aware back in Europe. And so you simply have to be curious, to be able to adapt to situations that are sometimes very subtly different and not obviously different. I mean, the language is an obvious thing. I got used to have a fairly thick French accent. I think I've been working on it, but sometimes it comes back, and I just take it as it's a funny thing. As long as people understand me, I just take it as with a pinch of salt and some humor, I guess. Now, in terms of being an immigrant, it's been rough over the past I would say 18 months. When the pandemic hit, I was at the very early stage of my green card application, and at the time, when the pandemic hit, everything shut down. The government started to, former President Trump started to make decisions about immigration, and so I was worried. I was probably calling my immigration lawyer on a weekly basis to know, is that affecting me? Is that new executive order affecting me? as long as you don't have some sense of I had job security, but I didn't have immigration security, and so it was really a hard period. With all of the anxiety that came with the pandemic, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with all of these things. There was a lot of emotions, and finally, when I received a green card in September last year, and that was such a relief. And you can finally make plans and projections. So I guess it's the outcome of being resilient as well, which I mentioned early on.
No doubt about that. That's good advice. Congratulations again on getting a green card. And by the way, you speak with a very distinguished French accent. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. A lot of people probably love it, me included. So let me summarize. What you said about fitting in difficult, in complex environment is that you take an interest, you are curious, and you ask questions, but you're respectful, and you want to pay attention to subtleties. Those are just wonderful and sage advice. I appreciate sharing that. Let's talk about working in the academia world, because it's notorious for being complex and political sometimes. So it's no doubt difficult. So share with us some lessons that you've learned working in complex and political environments.
Well, I think it's you have different systems in higher ed. You have the tenure track system, and you have the non-tenure track system. And I've been working in both. When I started at the University of Houston and Virginia Tech, ESSEC Business School in France, they were all tenure track types of systems. And in essence, what happens there is you have a series of 3 years to prove to your peers that you're worthy of getting tenured. And you're only worthy of getting tenured if you publish enough in academic journals. And so there's no, the way you're evaluated is really you're evaluated by a committee of peers, and you're evaluated then by your dean. And so you have to work laterally, and you have to work up, right? So you have to make sure your boss kind of respects you, the dean. So you have to manage up, and you have to manage laterally your colleagues, because some of them may end up in your evaluation committee. So you have to be also respected by your peers, which is a challenge in education, because you're not really evaluated by students in that context, and which has a lot of you can be very critical about that system that kind of puts students away from making the tenure decision. So you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the tensions. Some faculty, they need to respect you, but not too much. You don't want to be too smart to kind of create shadows on them. So you have to be just aware of up and the management up and the colleagues, just to make sure that you navigate through that system well enough. And I've always done that by being true to myself. So I've never kind of lied, because I think if you're not true to yourself, it's gonna get you at some point. You're gonna make a mistake, and people will just realize that you were not true to yourself, and so they will keep that against you. So you have to be true to yourself. You have to be honest. You have to be direct, but still while being aware of the environment and the sensitivities of your peers and bosses. But you have to be honest. And again, I think I always consider myself as a continuous student, because I learn every day. And so I go back to that notion of curiosity. You need to be also constantly learning from your peers, from others. It's always been helpful to me. Now, in the other environment, which is the one I'm currently in, which is a non-tenure track environment, faculty are contract faculty. We renew their contract every 2, 3, or 5 years, and the evaluation is essentially based on student success, which is something I personally value greatly, and I think it's a very good system compared to the other one. And then myself, I'm evaluated by my boss, the dean of the school, who renew my contract every 3 years. So the political environment, I'd say I had a harder time adjusting to it at NYU. I thought NYU is a gigantic university, 65,000 students. It's a 13 or 14 billion yearly budget. It has, includes a hospital, Langone hospital system. We have all of these different schools and colleges. So it's a big corporation in many ways. We're not for profit, but it's run like a corporation. We have a lot of real estate in Manhattan, as you can imagine, and that's complicated to manage. And so things were going slower than I expected at NYU. So I became a little bit impatient early on in my tenure here. So I just had to learn that I'm on a different time frame now. I'm in my position. I'm thinking about the next 5 to 10 years as opposed to the next 2. And so I had to learn that and make the adjustment, and became increasingly patient, which doesn't mean I don't want things to be to be done, but I've learned to be patient in complex environment and bureaucratic and political environment. You have to be patient.
I agree with you. You do
I
have to
learned
be
it the hard way. Yeah.
in complex and political environments. But I also heard you say, and very wisely, a few things that you do very well, which is you be true to yourself, you do a good job, you earn the respect of others around you, and you are respectful to them, they're respectful to you. And by the way, don't outshine them too much. Don't be a threat to other people. That's really good advice. Let's talk about the spectacular journey that you've been on and the achievements you've been able to accomplish. What are some of the contributing factors to your success?
I think I've said I've said yes in my life much more often than I said no. Even when someone like what I said when Lausanne said, do you want to do an MBA? That wasn't part of my career plan, right? My career plan was, do the chef apprenticeship, learn the cooking skills, then go to Lausanne, get your bachelor in hotel management to get the management skills, and then open your restaurants. That was my plan. That was my dream. But then they came up with something I had never thought of. And I said, it's free. I can learn. I can continue to learn. I can earn another credential. I can meet other people. Yes, I'll do it. And so I did it. And then when Mike Olson said, do you want to do a PhD? Honestly, I didn't know what PhD meant. Not at all. But the guy was smart, the smartest guy I've ever met. His knowledge base was gigantic. He knew everything. I mean, I've always tried to find something he didn't know that I knew, and I failed to that. So he was such a wonderful human being, number one, but also such a clever man. And so when he said, do you want to do your PhD? I just said yes. I took the chance. I said, I can always own my restaurants because these skills I carry them with me. But if I do that, a PhD, and I'm going to learn new skills, I'm going to learn, new knowledge. It's going to expand my frontiers. I remember taking courses. I took so many courses in statistics or in econometrics, these kinds of things. Do I ever use them? Yes, sometimes in my research, but I mostly use them intellectually to frame problems conceptually. And so it's been incredibly useful. So first advice is to successful careers, say yes more often than no. And I remember when Lausanne came and said, do you want to be a teaching assistant? I said yes. And they said, okay, can you teach finance, but in the English program? So I took, when I was at the school there, I took the program in French. and my English wasn't really good. And they said, well, can you teach that in English? And I said, yes. And I really didn't know if I could. But, I took all of my courage. I took some additional English lessons, and I started to teach in English. And that contributed to my success in the program, in the MBA program, and contributed to my success then in my PhD program. And then, hopefully contributed to my success here at NYU. So saying yes, even if the step seems a little high, a lot of people can figure it out. So that's one. Two, I come back to that notion of curiosity and always being curious about new things. That's probably the say yes, be curious, stick to your true self. And I did that in one of my last jobs when I took a job in Switzerland and with hotel schools that had been acquired by a French private equity firm. And there's nothing wrong with private equity firms, but I think their profit obsession clashes too much with the educational goal of higher education. So I took the job, well paid, close to my family, in a beautiful setting in the Alp Mountains. And I at some point I said, no, be true to yourself, and I quit the job, and I took a step back in a way. I was chief academic officer. I'm associate dean. It's different environment. NYU is much bigger, but I kind of took a step down in a way. But I think it's on paper, because the reality is I took a step up. I joined the U.S., New York, NYU. I've never met so many leaders like yourself of the industry, thanks to the NYU conference. So, by being true to yourself, you're gonna find the way where you really fit. And I think right now I found that. I'm probably here to stay for a while, as long as NYU wants me, because I think it's a great fit. So I said a lot of time yes. I remain curious and stay true to myself, even if it meant sometimes taking a step, perceptually step down. Something you would think it's a step down, but it actually isn't.
Yeah, I that's a wonderful story. I appreciate you sharing that. And you talk about curiosity, continuous learning, not being afraid to take a risk, and also sometimes recognizing that it's not the right job, and not being afraid to make a change because you ultimately want to be true to yourself. Those are just wonderful lessons and advice that you're sharing. I appreciate that. Now, I have no doubt, like many of us, we've all faced challenges and difficulties and sometimes disappointments. And you alluded to the stress that you were under during the pandemic because you're waiting for the green card, and there's like so many factors working against you. And no doubt that's a tremendous challenge. Can you share with us your approach to challenges?
First, I think it's always better to face challenges when you're with someone, together, with other people. So that's the strength of we, right? Whether it's in my personal life, I have a wonderful wife, Stephanie, and we were in it together, and like any lasting marriage, I guess everyone has a lasting marriage, that you're going to go through some challenging times, whatever they are. But luckily, I was with Stephanie, and so the morning I woke up and totally panicking about that immigration status. She was calm and quiet, and she was able to take me out of that panic mode. And the next day it was her who was having some anxiety issues, and I was the one who was able to help her get past that. So I think it's always easier to face challenges when you're not alone. I think that's number one. And that's true in business too. That's true at work. That's true in your career. When you have colleagues or mentors and advocates who can help you cope with some of your career related challenges, it's always better. And I'm lucky in every institution I've worked. I can say I have at least one or two people that I consider as close friends, that I've made close friends with, and that I consider as mentors. And so I can pick up my phone and I can say, hey, this is what I'm facing right now. What do you think? And so again, the power of having friends and mentors and partners, that's probably one of the best way to cope with challenges. The other one is resilience. I think our industry has learned that from the pandemic. We're going to get through this. And I remember, when you were on the webinar with the other, hotel group CEOs and Kristen Seta, and we still had Arnie Sorensen, in 2020. Everybody was saying, we're going to get through it. It's hard. It's probably the hardest thing we've ever faced as industry, but we're going to get through it. And indeed, the industry got through it. And so that's a matter of resilience and deep belief that, there's another meaning to life or to business or to things that it's not captured in a moment that may be very challenging. And so you're going to get past it. There's a trajectory to life or to business that's the trajectory is not going to change. There may be a bump in the road, but the trajectory is not going to change. And you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep the faith in it. I tell my students that, constantly, because so many of my students, when the hotel industry, overnight shut down, and they were about to graduate, well, you had to tell them something, right? You had to tell them, it will be tough for the next, and we didn't really know back then. We thought it was like a couple of months, maybe, hopefully by, and it took longer. But once it rebounds, then there will be plenty of opportunities. People will be dying to hire you. And this is exactly what's happening today. People are dying to hire our students. And so you just have to take the long view sometimes and not get, dragged down by the short-term challenge you're facing. So I think these would be my approach, my different approaches to coping with challenges.
Yeah, no, that's again very, very good advice. You talked earlier about having a network that you can lean on and building a team that you can trust and can get you through challenges. I think those things are so important. And then having the belief and the faith in order to find the resilience, that's also really important, because when you're going through a really difficult situation, you do need to find hope, and that hope comes from yourself. You've got to be able to muster up the courage to believe in yourself and believe in a team, and that's how you can get through it. That's great advice. Thank you. Now, switching gears, you've talked about this industry's labor situation. Before the pandemic, the labor situation I would call a pretty severe challenge, but after the pandemic, it's an outright crisis. But you've made a comment that the industry's labor crisis is not due to a lack of talent. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's. I think there is talent out there. I think the challenge the industry really now is there is talent and there are good jobs, and there's a missing matching mechanism, and the matching mechanism historically was people really wanted to join the industry. The industry had a good reputation, and a lot of people wanted to get jobs in an industry that makes people dream, right? I mean, travel is about dreaming about places, going somewhere, and enjoying new experiences. But I think for a couple of years, and that predates a little bit the pandemic, I think the industry took it for granted a few years prior to the pandemic, and And I'd say hotel school and hospitality programs too. We took it for granted. People want to do a career in hospitality management, and the reality is not so much anymore, because the perception that people have developed, and that's been accelerated by the pandemic, the perception is that the jobs are, frontline jobs only. They're housekeeping jobs, they're front of the house jobs, and that there's nothing beyond that, and that there's nothing around it. So people are not aware of the entirety of the hotel industry when it comes to jobs. They don't know jobs at the headquarters. They certainly don't know jobs in the back of the house as much as they know the front of the house. They don't know that there's a good career in hotel finance. You can be, a director of finance is a great job. They don't necessarily know the, revenue management. They don't know that we have engineers. They don't know we have all of that technology component nowadays in the industry. They still focus on these entry-level jobs that were very visibly affected by the pandemic, because they were the first one that we had to, as an industry, we had to furlough or let go. And they were the most visible ones. And so I think the industry, and I know that HNLA and others are working on it to change the perception, to change the branding of the industry when it comes to a career, offering good career choices and good career pathways. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. I also think that we all know that in this country we have a higher education crisis. So it's not you have a hotel industry labor crisis. You have talent pool that's no longer kind of able to match with the jobs that are available. And on top of it, you have a higher education crisis, it's in the news every day. We're talking about student debt and issues about funding for college degrees. And I don't think everyone needs a college degree. I mean, look at me. I have one ultimately, but I didn't necessarily have to have one. I could have had a great career without one. Because there's a system in Switzerland that allow for people to go through a career pathway without necessarily having to pay for college. And paying for college is expensive. It's an expensive proposition. I mean, if I look at NYU, NYU is expensive, no question about it. It's one of the best university in the country, but also it's very expensive to operate. I mean, when you think about the cost of operating in Manhattan, it's extremely expensive. When you have faculty and staff in Manhattan, you have to pay them more than if you're in another city, but because cost of living is too expensive. So it's very expensive, and not every job, especially in our industry, especially the early jobs, allow for paying back that student debt. And so when you graduate and you have $50, $60, $120,000 in debt, you question whether you want to take a first job at $35,000 a year. You kind of look at it and say, hey, I know that in maybe 2, 3, 5 years down the road I can make $85,000, but am I willing to carry that student debt for 5 years while I'm making $35,000 to $55,000? So there's a challenge there, and so you have really three things. Your industry lost branding power for talent. People who are questioning the value proposition of the industry, and young graduate who carry loads of debt. And so things have to change. And I think on one hand, the industry is working on providing better working environments with more flexible scheduling on property and et cetera, which is a great things to do. Higher education also need to do something, and so we told you about a project we have, which is a project of bringing that Swiss apprenticeship model in the US, which would hopefully award an associate degree by NYU at a fraction of the cost of a traditional bachelor degree. And we're going to focus on a few career pathways to begin with. We're going to focus on hotels, hotel operations. We're going to focus on sales and marketing. We're going to focus on event management. to start with, and see if it works. We would focus on high school students in their junior and senior year. They would work part-time as an apprentice, graduate from high school after their senior year, transfer to the NYU associate program degree, and graduate within another year. And they get paid because they get paid as an apprentice, and they get their education at a fraction of the cost. So I think that's one way higher education also need to change. So the hotel industry needs to change, higher education needs to change, to get that matching mechanism back in place.
Yeah, no, I wish you much success with that, and I applaud you for starting that program, because that's a similar program to some countries in Europe have that, Switzerland, Germany, and others, and it's proven. And if you go back to the objective of lowering the cost of tuition to earn a college degree and creating a pathway and giving people on-the-job training from the get-go, I think those are all wonderful things. I wish you much success with that.
Thank you.
We're coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, would you be kind enough to share some advice to women and minority groups who are trying to get ahead but find it difficult?
I would say it's take advantage of any kind of networking opportunities you may have, and open up, reach out to people. People are willing to help and support. I give you an example. We've launched at NYU. Last year. We've launched an incubator for new startups and founders who wants to get early stage funding. And so when we launched the incubator program, it's open to NYU students, every NYU student and alumni. So we had some press coverage, and a week later, I had a woman from Indian background. I think she's second generation from India. Her parents own a small hotel, and she said to me, she said, "Well, look, this is my startup idea, but I'm struggling finding people I can talk to." And she said, "Well, I graduated from a community college on the West Coast," and she said, "I just don't know anyone in the industry that I can talk to get my product piloted in a hotel." And she said, "Well, you at NYU, you have all of this network. What can you do to help me?" And so I broke my own rule, and I said, "Well, we're gonna take that startup, and we're gonna have her into the incubator program so that she can meet all of our mentors and investors and give her the advice." So she's the perfect example of what women and minorities have to do. They have to reach out. They have to say, "Oh, I read about that guy who's like, at NYU, he talks about all of the networking opportunities he's giving to his students. Let me talk to him and see whether he's willing to give some of it to me." And she did that. She reached out, and I broke my own rule to help her. So people need to reach out. I think if you reach out, the worst you can get is just someone who won't respond. That's the worst, is the person doesn't respond. It doesn't cost anything to reach out to people and seek advice and guidance. Look, we have, as you know, the Marriott Sorensen Center for Hospitality Leadership at Howard University. We'll soon have new programs and a new. I think that they're looking at the major in hospitality and tourism management, and we invited 20 students at the conference, both in November and in June, to volunteer together with our students. And the feedback from these minority, men and women was, we didn't realize that it was so easy to talk to senior leaders. We never knew about that. And so I think just that feedback makes me say, well, reach out to people. They can be senior executives, presidents, whatever. Reach out to them. You never know. They may respond. And if they do, it's going to help you a great way.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I've always believed in being proactive, taking charge, and your advice of reaching out, it's actually not as difficult as one might think. That's excellent advice. Well, thank you so much. And Nick, I appreciate all the sage advice you've dispensed today and also your time. I know you're extremely busy. Thank you again. And to the audience, if you enjoyed today's interview, there are plenty more on our website. It's deiadvisors.org. We hope to see you on our website, deiadvisors.org. Thank you again.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.